tonight to see this lovely lady's daughter, Lucy.
Yes.
Present her.
Yes, her little film on Ithaca. Well, her ancestry connections
beautiful.
to
Specifically,
Ithaca.
Katina.
Yes, her dear Auntie Katina.
That's lovely. You must be so proud of her.
Oh, I know. Yes, it's been a lot of work for her.
Okay.
She's the grandmother of the director.
Grandmother of the director, Lucy. And the name is?
Joan.
Joan, of course, we met before, and it's Philip's mum.
That's right.
Yeah, got it. And here is?
The director.
Hello, how are you? Nice to see you. I saw you in Greece, in Ithaca, when you were just starting your journey.
Yeah, in 2019.
Yes. Remember? Yes. Hello.
My friend Nina.
Hi. Nina.
Nina, yeah.
Are you Greek?
No.
Oh, you have such an Ithacan name.
That's all right. Yeah. We'll adopt you.
Do you know that it's a very Ithacan name?
No, I didn't know that.
My mother, my daughter.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, how nice.
You're meant to be. Beautiful. And Sophia, my daughter, Sam, my partner, and Daniel, Ella's partner. We're all bonding.
On the other side of the world, and for centuries it was a significant spot between Constantinople and Venice. It was an important place where ships came in.
Congratulations, I love this film. Before we begin the conversation, there's someone I want to mention, and that's my wife Dora Varvarigos. I love Ithaca, but it was Dora that brought me to Ithaca, and so she introduced me to a wonderful part of my life and our lives. And our son, we used to take our son there, and we'd live in the village of Aya Sorunda, which you saw in the film. And for months on end, I think the most blissful moment in my life was walking down from the mountain village of Anoyi to the village of Stavros on a full moon night with my son Alexander and with Dora, and this ancient landscape, and the moon was following us, and I kept singing "I'm Being Followed by a Moon Shadow" by Cat Stevens. And when we got down to Stavros, I realised I'd lost my watch. I think I just wanted time to stop. But look, I think this is a lovely film. I think it's lyrical in the script. There is one line I've taken out from the script. I like to think that the memory of you and your ancestors are imprinted into the landscape and mountains. The olive trees are your longest standing witnesses. Maybe some stories are retained in the olive tree sculptures Leonidas gave me. Isn't that beautiful? And I think there's a lot of beauty in the script that you wrote, Lucy.
Thank you.
But what I wanted to do to begin is to actually discuss the way you made it, because I think it's very interesting. I think there's a lot of courage in the way you made it. You didn't take the easy option. You decided to use grainy film, as you said, and also you decided to have these blackouts to convey a sense of fragments. Can you talk a bit about that?
About the fragments.
And about the use of grainy film.
Yeah, I think the medium itself, I mean, having an interest in analogue filmmaking anyway, but this medium of 16mm, this ancient medium, does reflect the story I'm trying to tell. I'm going back into something in time, or nostalgia, as we were talking about. And also the fragments. I've only got fragments of Katina, so those blackouts were trying to symbolise that, and I think that was the best way to visually do that.
Well, it's interesting, this, I don't know whether it is a work in progress or a finished work in a way, because what I think you've done is, like, in those little fragments, they hint at far bigger stories, each fragment. So in a way, it's a film of questions, right?
Yeah.
Is that the way you would see it?
Definitely, yeah, it is a film of questions, and making this film has given me even more questions. I didn't really get any answers.
I think it's one of the strengths, actually, that you don't give answers, you give impressions. I mean, look, I must say there was a moment that moved me, and I probably Dora to tears, and that's seeing Efthymio on screen, because you know, he mentioned the tragedy of losing his son to the sea, and we were there about a week later, and it was a very, very sad time on the island. But that's another example of just a hint at a much, much bigger story.
Definitely.
And what I wanted to ask you really is to go to the heart of it, right? When you were a child, how did you think about your Greekness?
I guess as a child I was quite embarrassed to be Greek. Yeah, and embarrassed of my surname. I think going to a white school. And I think what, I guess, perked up my interest to be, or rediscovered me being Greek, was studying an arts degree in philosophy and then ancient Greek. And yeah, having an interest in like etymology of words and finding that in ancient Greek. And then, yeah, talking to my grandfather about it, my papu, and yeah, it's been like, oh, you're actually more Greek than you've made out to be. You know, he hid a lot of his Greek identity, and I think because I started to learn a bit of Greek, I connected to him more in that way, and then had more of a connection to Ithaca. I'm like, oh, there's so much Greek mythology and history here, but there's this whole part of his identity I hadn't seen because of him not really sharing that. I mean, he shared it through cooking, but not through stories and things. And then, yeah, I had more of an interest of Katina too, as a woman too, and that's how it started.
Well, of course, that's very much one of the major themes. Your exploration of women in Ithaca, and you brought up a lot of interesting questions. There was a term that I heard on the island from women, several women in the village, who paradoxically, like some of the women you see here, saw coming to Australia as a kind of liberation, and the term they used was stenos kiklos, that the island or living in the village could sometimes feel like a closed circle.
Yeah. And also Katina's mother saying she didn't like the gossip. I guess that happens on a small island mentality. Everyone knows all your business. And so it makes sense why, yeah, my great-grandmother didn't want to go back there. But then she was also really deprived here too, and not being able to speak English, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful theme, and in a way it's sort of like, you know, there is that very misunderstood word, I think, and I think you understand it better in the Greek, nostalgia, you know, which is literally the pain of longing for the return.
Yeah.
How do you see that plays out, nostalgia, in terms of...
For myself?
Yeah,
I guess for me, I have this longing to want to return to Greece. And I think, I don't know, wanting to find more of your roots, or I think being, you know, in Australia, wanting to hold on to more culture that you have. But I think, I think it's just, place can, mean different things to everyone, but I just felt like my identity made a lot more sense when I was over there. And I think the thing that really struck with me was when I went to all these places that had rituals like panegyri. Is that how you say it, panegyri? And when I joined in all the dances, I was like, this whole part of me just was alive that I didn't know existed, and that was a part of my grandfather's life and Katina's life, and I just felt like it was really lacking here.
Tell me something. That moment when you were on the ferry, I guess, coming from Patra, that moment when you first saw Ithaca coming, was that a special moment?
It really was. It was really surreal. It's like what it looks like in the postcards.
It is. I mean, that I love that moment when the island kind of appears. You see Kefalonia, and then
something about the mountains, and just I guess the blue line, seeing the endless blue line or something. I guess being a dreamer or a writer, you know, it just lets the mind wander forever.
But going back to this issue of nostalgia, what I find really interesting is that, you know, at least one of the women you spoke to on the island had nostalgia for Australia.
Yeah.
I knew several women on the island who said the same thing. It was my husband who wanted to come back, not necessarily me.
Yeah. I feel like it's something you could answer better.
Well, I think your film explores it,
Yeah,
actually.
one aspect, I guess, one character. Yeah. And
So what do you think it was for her, the nostalgia for Australia?
I think it was her family and her community were here at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And when she does talk about maybe having a Greek husband, she would feel more connected to her Greekness. That was in archival footage that Spiridor shared with me, and that was taken in the 90s. And, you know, there was like a whole other film I could have made with all this really interesting archival footage that interviews her and some other Ithacan women of their connection between Ithaca and here. And yeah, a lot of the women said that their identity was wrapped up in their family or their husband. And, you know, yeah, there's so many questions.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you're hinting out at all kinds of things. You know, repressed sexuality, perhaps.
Yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of things hovering there, and yet at the same time, the women are expressing a deep connection to family as perhaps still what's central in their life. Did you feel that contradiction, that sort of?
Most definitely, yeah.
And
definitely, because I guess Katina, I know that she was the carer of the family, and did have to hold these deep complexities of all the whatever you can call it, family secrets. But yeah, I think she was really the glue of that family, but yet also deprived her from being free and having her own independence. And so it is a contradiction.
I think it's a haunting film in many ways, partly the way you shot it, but I think we are kindred spirits in a number of ways. And one of them is that you know, when I first set on foot on Ithaca in the late 80s, that, you know, what you were struck by were the ruins, right?
Yeah.
And you too, you know, those ruins feature. I mean, you could have shot a totally different film, you know, a more romantic view of the island, some of its glorious, absolutely glorious sights, but you chose the kind of, you worked against that in a way. What is it that what do you think it was that drew you to that aspect of Ithaca?
Yeah, I think having, as you said, an interest in history and the time that's come before you in millennia, and you know that it's so rich with history there. And I think I just kind of film what I first see, you know, what takes to my eye. I don't think about it too much, and because I was shooting on a Bolex camera, I couldn't actually shoot anything twice because film is so expensive and valuable, and that's why I shot on the expired film, because I can't afford new film.
Is that the reason?
That was one of the reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
Look, there are many, many more questions, and I want to open that up to the audience. But I wanted you to reflect on one last thing, and that is, it's interesting that the archetypal story of men and women on Ithaca is the story of Penelope waiting, and Odysseus out there, you know, fighting in the wars in Troy, and then making his long adventurous way back home. I wanted to explore that a little bit. Did you have that thoughts about that archetype?
Most definitely, and I think that's why I'm so interested in a place like Ithaca, because I am interested in archetypes, and I was interested in Jungian theory for a long time, but also, the etymology of things. I think studying ancient Greek as well. But yeah, I think it's really important to know, as I said, what was before you, and I think when you've just surrounded by ruins all the time, it's kind of like being in Rome. It's just like, how can you not think about these things all the time? And it does feel quite spiritual in that sense.
And also the, when I wrote the novel Sea of Many Returns, I deliberately tried to reverse that myth, to have 3 generations of women rather than 3 generations. You've got King Laertes, you've got Odysseus and Telemachus, and Telemachus and Odysseus go down to see the old king after many years. He doesn't recognise his own son, and yet, and then Odysseus says, "Well, I know who planted that olive tree, and I know who planted this, that, and the other." But what I found is that actually it was the women that basically knew who planted this tree and who planted that grove and all of this. So, I find that fascinating, how these archetypes, perhaps patriarchal type archetypes.
Yeah, and I guess this film is an ode to women, for sure. And even, we can talk, I know you're interested in the song by Arletta too, and that's quite a provocative song.
Can you say a few words about that amazing song at the end?
I guess you only know the lyrics if you speak Greek. So I'm not sure if anyone.
I've got them here,
Oh, do you?
Yeah, look, I'll read them out and then we'll open it up to questions. So, I found this an amazing song. It's an incredible song, and it's beautiful, isn't it? It was a beautiful way to end. It's called Bar Tornavagio, and it's sung by Arletta, and it says, "Late yesterday at the bar, the shipwreck, I found myself drinking with a saint. He was sitting on the next stool, and he partook of whiskey and water. I told him, 'Grandpa, what are you asking for here? This is no place for a saint.' He told me, 'Son, you are making a big mistake. Here is the fear of the people and the passion.' He looked around dry and drunk, and he told me, 'I love the hellish ones. If you want to sanctify, you must sin. Even if you catch up, let's repent. Late yesterday at the bar of the shipwreck, I found myself drinking with a saint. He was sitting on the next stool, and he partook of whiskey and water. He was sitting on the next stool. In the end, he also paid the bill.'" You can Google it, actually. There's some amazing versions of that song. And once again, I think, you've got a courageous sort of approach to these things, both intuitively and deliberately. But look, I'd like to open it up now for questions from the audience. For Lucy.
Or Arnold.
Looks like you can ask a question of either. Who would like to ask a question, and I can bring the mic to you? You could talk about Ithaca, either of these experiences.
One of my favourite moments in the film was, or the moment that I was interested to learn about from you, Lucy, was when you lost the hidden eye or the all-seeing eye necklace. What was that moment like for you as the filmmaker shooting this film? Did that have an impact on you? Was there some kind of like emotional reaction, or like what did that mean to you essentially?
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful question. Thank you, Jordan. I think losing, the Mati, the eye, I still have the gold necklace, but I felt like maybe I had lost a bit of Katina, but then maybe it was Matt. I'm not sure if it was Matt. We, pointed out that it's actually really beautiful that is returned to a place that Katina was from, and the necklace she gave me was actually from there. So it was this nice full circle and a poetic way to see. But hence the title of the film. It's a bit cliche, but that's why it's called The Hidden Eye. That's my answer. James?
Well, firstly, thank you, Lucy.
Thank you,
It's
James.
A remarkable achievement to have been, have that level of intimacy afforded this very diverse range of people. But I'm curious about that when you introduced the film, you said that Arnold had said that the film is a work in progress. Well, I'd urge you for it to be a constant work in progress, because memories and souvenirs and these kind of excavations, I mean, film is always intended to be finished and then it's done. It's a fixed asset. But something like this should, in my view, probably the worst possible suggestion that could be made to a filmmaker is to keep evolving that and to keep sharing it. I think that's really important, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. And there is so much material left. Like, this is only a tiny bit of what Matt and I documented, and then I've also got the archival footage. But you know, these things about identity and memory are things that you want to explore your whole life, and how far do you want to peel an onion, you know? But this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I knew that I had to finish it to present it here. So this is the first iteration. So thank you everyone for watching. I also would like I asked Arnold if he could also read a poem, if that's possible, because he's a beautiful writer and storyteller, and this poem is inspired by Ithaca or Greece, Sea of Many Returns, the mulberry tree. No?
Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, Lucy asked me to read this poem, and she heard it. I recited it on a program called Spoken Word in 3CR. It's called The Mulberry Trees, and it's based on a story that I heard the night before, or the last night of the life of Gilly Smith, who was married to Basil Efthymiadis, who came from Rhodos, and we all went to school together. That's where my love for Hellenic culture and for Greece began, in multicultural post-war Melbourne. And then, so I heard this story last year, in the middle of last year, an extraordinary story, and I turned it into a poem. In a way, I think I can see why you asked me to recite it, because it does have echoes of what Lucy is exploring. Years later, he entered the harbour he had left as a boy, laboured up the stone steps to village alleys festooned by bougainvillea, took the paths that forked to the ruins. He slept under the stars that first night, cradled by the skeleton of what once was the family home. In the morning he hired 2 labourers. Bring me the saplings of 2 mulberry trees, he instructed, one for either side of the front doorway. He knew he would die before there would be foliage to shade the passing wayfarer, foresaw his burial in the village graveyard, foresaw his grandchildren gathered in from the 4 corners, entering the harbour like seamen returned from their night fishing, foresaw their ascent to a house restored, his parting gift, his atonement for the abandonment of their ancestors. So that's the poem, and I want to conclude by saying, yes, it is a work in progress, but it's also, I think it is complete in itself. And having seen it 3 or 4 times now, I'm still haunted by it, and I'm still, and it is a film that raises so many questions. And so I congratulate you on your achievement, and yeah, I think this is something that you're going to pursue, obviously. And so let's all give Lucy a round of applause.